US President Donald Trump has held talks with the Syrian president, who until recently was on Washington's terrorist blacklist. The White House visit by President Ahmed al-Sharaa comes after the rebel-turned-ruler toppled autocratic leader Bashar al-Assad earlier this year and is now trying to end Syria's decades of isolation. It was the first visit to the US capital by a Syrian head of state since national independence in 1946. The Syrian president told US media his former association with al-Qaeda was not discussed.
We talked about the future, the present and the past, and so we talked about lifting the sanctions, and there was a decision at the United Nations at the Security Council to lift the sanctions on myself and other people as well.
Former Middle East correspondent Nicole Johnston is with me in the studio. Hi, Nicole. So what is the Syrian leader hoping to get out of this meeting with the US president?
Well, for Ahmed al-Sharaa, it's all about one thing. It's sanctions. Syria is desperate to get sanctions relief, and it has had some relief. Some of them were lifted. There's a whole raft of them. Some of them were lifted in June. But what it wants lifted permanently is these so-called Caesar sanctions. Now, President Trump has announced that he will pause those sanctions for 6 months, 180 days. So that is something. But President al-Sharaa, he wants them, off the table once and for all. But to have that happen, it needs to get approval from both houses of US Congress. And that hasn't happened so far. So he is there to really put on this charm offensive and to try and convince US legislators that it is time to lift those sanctions, because really Syria can't move ahead economically without it, because the Caesar sanctions are very strong. They basically make it illegal for any country to do for any country or company to do business with Syria. So now that has been paused for 180 days, but not with regards to both Iran and Russia. And so that is another sort of side point, but it's very interesting because it goes to show that the US is trying to clearly put Syria well into its orbit and out of the orbit of both Iran and Russia, which historically are the countries that have influenced, semi-controlled, and have used Syria as proxies during the 14-year civil war that we had.
So it's a year on since the fall of Bashar al-Assad. How popular is al-Sharaa in Syria now?
It's difficult to know. We haven't had any formal elections there yet. Some of the polling is suggesting that at the moment his popularity is around 80%. But I think it depends on where you go in Syria. Minorities are still deeply concerned about al-Sharaa, and that's because of his, as President Trump would say, tough past. I mean, al-Sharaa was the leader of a group called HTS, Hayat al-Tahrir al-Shams. Now, this was regarded as a terrorist organisation. It was affiliated, an offshoot of al-Qaeda. He was classified as a terrorist. He had a $10 million US bounty on his head. He says that he has changed, that he has transformed and he's reformed. But many people in Syria just don't believe it. And Syria is a real patchwork of minorities. It's a Sunni Arab majority, but aside from that, you've got Christians, Druze, Alawites, Kurds, the list goes on. And no wonder they don't trust him, because over the last 9 months or so, there have been at least two massive massacres that have taken place in Syria, one against the Druze, one against the Alawites. The most recent one was in the south of the country, in Suwaida. So they don't trust the president, and they don't want to see the United States basically sort of open the door, have this great welcoming when they don't feel that their own security and safety is being protected inside Syria.
And how are Syria's neighbours competing for influence in the country?
Well, that is the other incredible thing that's going on in Syria at the moment, and we don't hear a lot about it. Israel has a huge tract of land inside Syria that it's controlling, so it has pushed its own borders beyond the occupied Golan Heights and into the south of Syria as well. Now, from Israel's perspective, it says that it needs to do this. It needs a buffer zone. It doesn't trust Ahmed al-Sharaa and the new transitional government in Syria. From Syria's perspective, it feels that it is being occupied, which it is, by Israel. Israel has doubled the number of military bases that it has in southern Syria. It controls the airspace above Syria. It was only a few months ago that Israel carried out a bombing raid in the capital, Damascus. So that's the Israeli side of it. Now, Israel is competing with Turkey inside Syria. So we've got Turkey in the north. What Turkey wants is different to what Israel wants. Israel wants to see Syria weak and divided so that it can continue to have influence, have territory and control it. Turkey would like to see Syria unified. It would like to see a stronger government that can take control of the Kurdish north. Because for Turkey, the big threat in Syria is that northeastern vast swathe of territory which is controlled by the Kurds. So in a nutshell, what we're seeing and what we've seen for decades really is Syria is continuing to be sort of used as a proxy playground for countries that want to project their own influence in the Middle East. And especially for Turkey. This is a real opportunity for Turkey to try and gain a foothold into Syria, something that in the past they haven't been able to do because it was the foothold of Iran and of Russia.
So how significant is this meeting between the leaders of the US and Syria in the White House?
Well, as you said, Ros, it's very significant. The first time a Syrian president has ever sat down in the White House. It is the first meeting for Ahmed al-Sharaa, someone who the United States regarded as a terrorist. And speaking to people in Syria this morning, people in the north, in Aleppo, also a Syrian who now lives in New Zealand, who was just in Damascus, people are hopeful. They do see it as a sign. Even those who don't trust Ahmed al-Sharaa, they do want to see their country sort of brought back into the international community to end the isolation. They hope to get sanctions relief, and for them, sort of anything like this is a sign of improvement. But it doesn't really change the reality on the ground for Syrians. There's still only a few hours of electricity a day. Speaking to a contact in Aleppo, he was saying, of course, the eastern part of Aleppo is still totally destroyed. People are worried about their futures, about children and education, and also about the hundreds of thousands of refugees who are now starting to return home to Syria. And what have they got to go back to?
Nicole, thank you.
You're welcome.